Welcome to Smarty Plants, a Minnesota Department of Agriculture podcast informing listeners about invasive species that affect our environment and agricultural resources. My name is Jennifer Barrington, and I will be your host. Emerald ash borer, or EAB, was first discovered in Minnesota in 2009. Since then, it has spread throughout much of the state and has had a major impact on Minnesota's ash trees. With EAB now confirmed in 60 counties, continued awareness and prevention efforts remain critical. To learn more about the pest itself, listen to Episode 9 of Smarty Plants titled Living with EAB, which explores EAB biology, impacts, and management in greater detail. Joining us today to discuss emerald ash borer are Mark Abrahamson and Jonathan Osthus. Thank you both for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thanks for having us.
Yep, you bet.
Mark received his bachelor's in biology from UW-Eau Claire and a master's in entomology from SUNY Syracuse. He started at the MDA in 1999 as an entomologist and has held roles in the Plant Protection Division as a unit supervisor and assistant director before becoming PPD's director in 2018, a position which he holds today. Jonathan is the Emerald Ash Borer Technical Assistance Coordinator for the MDA's Plant Protection Division. He began working on the early detection and management of emerald ash borer shortly after it was first found in St. Paul in 2009. So to get us started, John, can you explain how EAB spreads and what the early signs of infestation are?
Yeah, so there's two different types of spread. We have human-assisted spread and we have the natural spread of the insect. So for natural spread, emerald ash borer will often emerge from ash trees and reinfest the same tree or another tree nearby, but a small proportion of the population will strike out longer distances. And the average spread rate ends up being about 1 to 2 miles per year for natural spread. The actual flight capacity of the insect, they can fly up to 6 miles in a day. But like I mentioned, that average spread rate for natural spread is about 1 to 2 miles a year. Then there is the human-assisted element, where people move things like infested firewood or infested ash logs long distances and can have emerald ash borer jump, from dozens to hundreds or even thousands of miles away. And so the early detection signs you want to look for if you're trying to spot emerald ash borer early on in a tree is you want to look for woodpecker damage. So when woodpeckers go after the insects underneath the bark of trees, when they're going after emerald ash borer, they'll slough off some of the outer bark in what we call blonding. So you'll have these kind of blonde patches in the mid to upper canopy of an ash tree early on with small, shallow, dime-sized woodpeck holes where they've gone after the insect underneath the bark. That's one of the main things that we use to try to detect emerald ash borer early. Some other things that you might see is a thinning canopy. So when emerald ash borer is attacking an ash tree, the trees tend to die from the top down. And so you'll see fewer leaves, smaller leaves, more light penetrating through that canopy and that canopy dying from the top. And along with the canopy decline, you also see things like bark splits. So there's these vertical cracks in the bark where that tree is started to grow and heal around that initial emerald ash borer gallery, creating this callus tissue that continues to grow, and the bark separates from the surface of the wood and creates a nice vertical split where you can see that nice serpentine gallery that emerald ash borer makes underneath the bark.
Well, thanks, John. That's very descriptive of what people should be looking for in their ash trees if they have some on their property. So we've learned over the years to look for woodpecker damage, but what did the early days of responding to EAB look like in terms of detection and survey methods, Mark?
Yeah, detecting emerald ash borer has been a problem from the beginning because you like I was talking about, you really don't detect it until it's kind of too late because it's already there and it's in numbers high enough to be damaging trees, and so we're always have been playing catch up. So I first got involved with emerald ash borer, I think like in 2005. So it was found in Michigan in 2002. And we started looking for it in Minnesota in 2005. And we would have the opportunity to go to workshops, say, in Michigan and like see infested trees. And so for me, that's always been a really important thing, is to try to pass on that, because there's no way to beat that experience of seeing it with your own eyes. And so, but that when we would go to a workshop, that like I would always be like, okay, I'm looking at a tree. How would I tell if this is infested or not? The group would be, peeling bark off and looking for galleries and whatnot. I would be wandering around looking at the other trees in the area like, well, how would I know if this one is infested or not? So for me, like the visual symptoms, cues has always been really interesting. And so, we did other things as well. There was a lot of work put into trapping. The problem is we don't have great attractants for emerald ash borer. There were some tools developed, have had some success over time, but like pretty limited in terms of actually trapping emerald ash borer in terms of a detection program. In Minnesota, probably because I was so interested in trying to find EAB looking at trees, we really honed in on the woodpeckers. Other folks also did branch sampling. So it was something that I really kind of came out of Canada in terms of operationalizing branch sampling as another way to look for emerald ash borer. So branch sampling, basically cutting off branches and stripping off the bark, looking for the larvae. So at some point, we did a study. We worked with the university. We got funding through the state of Minnesota, and we actually did a study looking at visual assessment of trees for woodpecking, branch sampling, and trapping. And from our study, visual survey was like the most bang for your buck. It's not perfect; like you're going to miss things, but in terms of like the resources you're expending, that is like the best way to find it. And so that is something we've been passing on to communities and others we're working with over time to try and help them get up to speed with how do you find it, which is kind of the starting point.
Yeah, I have many fond memories of walking around in the winter looking for woodpecker damage on ash trees and peeling the bark for those branch samples. I think John also.
Yeah, fond memories and. Probably could have built a couple log cabins with the amount of trees that we've peeled, but
I think so. Between the three of us, at least here in the room, yep, that would probably make a cabin or a few
miles of logs,
miles and miles. Yes. So, what lessons has Minnesota and other states learned from responding to EAB infestations? I know you talked about the work that we did on how to detect it and stuff, but in response, I know some states have done more, some states have done less, and different options.
Yeah. So, initially when emerald ash borer was found in Michigan, there was a very aggressive approach to try and eradicate it through removal of trees. And the what killed that was the how hard it was to detect it. So we just never able to catch up to it to the point where they could get their arms around it and get rid of it that way. And so when emerald ash borer showed up in Minnesota, it was kind of at a weird point where that effort had failed. And I think in other places they were kind of like, well, what are you going to do? There's not, there isn't really anything you can do. We kind of took a middle ground where we recognize we're not getting rid of it, but if we can be really aggressive, perhaps we can slow it down, buy ourselves some time. And so particularly in those early years when we had a limited number of infestations, limited number of communities we're dealing with, and communities that had some resources to put towards forest management, and we were really encouraged them to be aggressive with finding and removing trees. That was actually another study we did with the university, the impact of that work, and we did, we bought some time in terms of that spread of emerald ash borer and growth out of that area. But at the same time, the story ends up kind of being the same. It just maybe here it's taken a little bit longer than it has elsewhere. So I think to me, the moral of the story is you have some ability to dictate, how emerald ash borer plays out in your state or community or whatever, but only some ability because it is also kind of a force in nature.
Right, and I think we've learned that you should be planning for the arrival of emerald ash borer before it shows up in your community, if at all possible, and begin taking actions like reducing the amount of ash resource that you have in public right-of-ways and things like that, and really trying to communicate as much as possible with your residents of what's going to take place with the ash trees and what the outcome will be, and that your ash tree isn't necessarily special and it's not going to be missed by this insect, so make a plan for it.
Perfect. So, John, if you want to kind of talk a little bit more about local agencies, residents, and community partners, how they can help early detection and prevention efforts.
Right. Well, coming to things like the Emerald Ash Borer field workshops that we put on has been really useful for engaging with public works folks and other interested community members to kind of get them familiar with early detection. So how to spot that woodpecker damage, how to identify the insect galleries, and taking that back to their community and keeping an eye on the trees there so that they can find it at least, when the symptoms start to become obvious. And then just having other trusted sources, resources, and messengers for spreading the word about emerald ash borer in their community has been a really big part of that, and what they can continue to do to help get that word out to residents so that they know that their trees are going to be impacted and they can start making a plan.
Yeah, and I'd say the biggest thing, don't be surprised. Is kind of my advice to people. This is something that is going to reach all parts of Minnesota. The timeliness for that is, it's still to be determined. And I think one of the things we've seen in Minnesota is perhaps it has moved more slowly, than it has elsewhere, but it's still moving. But, you've got ability as the owner or manager of whatever trees are under your care to have a plan for when, that inevitability is going to occur, and, to be prepared to take some steps. And there are options, if somebody has an individual trees or a few trees of high value, insecticides are a great option to protect those trees. And if it's a situation where insecticides are not a good option, you're going to be planning to that tree or trees are going to die. And are they trees that are going to be threatening a structure or human safety? If they are, you're going to need a plan for how you're going to get rid of them. If they're not, then maybe, nature can just take its course and they'll die and fall over. But I think, like John said, it's going to get to your tree too. So you shouldn't be surprised when that happens, and you have an opportunity to plan in advance for how you're going to handle that. But those are kind of your three options. Either the tree's going to die and fall apart, you're going to have it cut down, or cut it down, or you preserve it with insecticides.
So those are kind of the three options. And you talked about kind of it's moving slower in Minnesota. So can the cold temperatures slow EAB spread, or has the insect shown that it can adapt?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways the cold can affect emerald ash borer. So one is just how long it takes it to complete a generation. So the time from when an egg is laid until a new adult beetle crawls out of a tree. And for emerald ash borer, that can take 1 to 2 years. And that's really dependent upon how much temperature they're accumulating during that time. So the warmer it is, the more likely the insects are to complete their development in 1 year. The cooler, more likely it is to be 2 years. So I think in Minnesota, it's probably 50-50, would you say?
In the metro area, it's even higher for a 2-year life cycle in northern Minnesota.
Okay, yeah. So right there, that's cutting it in half. Like how quickly they're going to be building up is just that taking an extra year to complete their development. And then also during the winter, if it gets cold enough, it will outright kill larvae, which we've been really interested in. That's another line of research we've done working with the university on winter mortality. And yeah, it has an impact. It probably has helped to slow the population growth in Minnesota, but it doesn't get rid of it. So there's not a part of Minnesota where we're going to expect that emerald ash borer can't exist because it's so cold. But it also may move more slowly through the north.
It opens up more opportunity for aggressive management in some of our more northern communities as well that could be more effective at slowing the rate at which that ash mortality occurs. And if you have a 2-year life cycle, that's more time for woodpecker predation and other factors to kill the larva.
Perfect. Well, since moving firewood is a major pathway, John, that you talked about earlier for spreading EAB, have outreach efforts like the Don't Move Firewood campaign improved public awareness over the years?
I would say yes. So there has definitely been an uptick in calls and questions about certified firewood. So the MDA certifies heat-treated firewood, which allows it to move freely throughout the state and go outside of the emerald ash borer quarantine areas or spongy moth quarantine areas. And I've just noticed an increase in calls of regular residents inquiring about, is it safe to move firewood from point A to point B? and just kind of wondering how that works. So people are much more aware of the actual regulations that exist and that it's a major vector for spreading pests. And that's been a pretty big change over the last 15 years.
Yeah, we've been spreading the message about don't move firewood and buy local, burn local, firewood too, to kind of hone in on Minnesota business and stuff also to help with that. So episode 14 of Smarty Plants is dedicated to EAB biocontrol for listeners who want more information. But John, can you share how successful these efforts have been so far? I know we've released 3 different species of non-stinging parasitoid wasps as biocontrol in Minnesota.
Yeah, so it's kind of an evolving story. So we began doing biological control releases in 2010 in the kind of far southeastern part of the state in Houston County on the Mississippi River. And from there, we've now released at over 54 sites in 19 counties and on tribal nation land. And so what we've seen is that they are able to establish. They're establishing, they have reproducing populations. They are persisting over time, and we are seeing their populations increase at certain sites where we've done more intensive monitoring. One thing that's been noticeable is that because we have a lot of the insects taking that 2-year life cycle, so taking 2 years to complete that life cycle, that's important for the parasitoids that we're releasing because they are dependent on those late instar emerald ash borer larvae to be present in the spring when they emerge before emerald ash borer does to be able to reproduce. And so in states that have more of their emerald ash borer completing their life cycle in 1 year, those larvae aren't present when those parasitoids initially emerge. So that's a very important factor that's helped our biological control program continue to see some success. So it's an important caveat for this is that it's not going to protect the mature trees as the initial wave of emerald ash borer comes through. Those large mature trees are still going to be killed by emerald ash borer in that initial wave. This is really kind of a strategy to try to keep ash in the system in the long term. So when you start to have ash regeneration, be able to protect those smaller trees as they grow to sizes that can then put out seed. So we're still somewhat early on in terms of biocontrol program, and we're going to find out more over the coming years and see if they're able to actually suppress emerald ash borer populations enough to keep ash in the system in the long term.
Perfect. And that's just one of the tools that is commonly used, like we talk about on that episode, in large forested environments where you're not going to go in and remove trees like Mark was talking about or use chemicals, any type of that treatment. So it's kind of an assistance with the management, but it's not going to solve the EAB problem.
Yeah, and it's kind of a sustainable management practice where you get something established and it moves with emerald ash borer as it moves into new areas.
Perfect. And Mark, what advice would you give communities that are just beginning to deal with the presence of EAB?
Yeah, well, we'd really proud we put together a really nice set of guidelines, I think, for communities several years ago as a team, which kind of outlines what an approach from the beginning to the end. And so the beginning of having emerald ash borer in a community is really your opportunity to be aggressive and try to limit the increase of that population, limit its spread by being vigilant about trying to find infested trees and then either getting them off the landscape or getting them treated with insecticide. But anything you can do in those early stages to affect the trajectory of that population growth is going to buy time for the rest of your trees, because it's a direct relationship from how many emerald ash borers there are to how fast your trees are dying, because it's the chewing of those beetles that kills the tree. And so the more beetles there are chewing in the trees, the faster they're going to die. So anything you can do to slow that down is going to buy you time and help you keep trees on the landscape longer. But as you like we talked about earlier, there's an opportunity to delay things, but it is also kind of an inevitability that there's a bad outcome at the end. So as you move through an infestation, I think your priorities kind of shift to where, initially we're trying to be really vigilant about keeping emerald ash borer under wraps as much as possible. But, as it gets more established, then it might become more about, like, how do we manage all this wood that's being generated in our community, and how do we deal with it so it's not moving somewhere else and spreading the infestation, but then also perhaps providing some value to us as well from wood products or mulch or whatever. So anyway, I think there's a kind of a range of approaches, and where you are with the infestation, your approach kind of changes.
Right. There's, like we've mentioned, there's no silver bullet for this. So using multiple management tactics to address things, really, and just take action. Doing something is a lot better than doing nothing in the scheme of things. And keep an eye out for grants that are available. There's been consistent funding over the last 7 or 8 years from the DNR Community Forest Program for communities to apply for funding to help with the cost of removals, replanting with a diverse set of species, so you don't have all this monoculture of so many of one species that will leave you better off for the next pest that comes through.
Yeah, and then the book that Mark, the guidelines, the EAB management guidelines is available as a PDF on our website. If you go to the MDA website and search for emerald ash borer, it will be on there that you can download it. There's some great pictures of the different woodpecker damage, a nice chart on how to determine kind of where you are in the stage of emerald ash borer management, if you have it yet or if you don't, what type of environment you're going to be working in, and different suggestions based on those different criteria. So it's a nice publication. I know a lot of communities really enjoy reading it, so especially so that they understand everything that's available, that they can do, or in all these options, and then they can choose what is best for their community. Because you guys have talked about all the different options: removing trees, treating trees, proactively looking for woodpecker damage, bark, peeling the bark off the trees to look for those galleries underneath, a lot of things that communities can do. What are the biggest priorities for EAB management moving forward?
I think it kind of like we were talking about, it depends where you are and kind of where what stage you are with emerald ash borer. And so for us as an agency, our focus is more on the new areas, right? Because that's kind of our job, is to try and find those new areas, know where emerald ash borer is occurring, try and limit them from getting to new places. And so, if you are, one of those communities that's out on the fringe where emerald ash borer really hasn't invaded yet, I mean, the detection should be, one of your main things is making sure you know how to recognize it and, have like some kind of system for keeping an eye out for it. Citizens and outreach to folks is a great way to do that. But if you are, a community that's more like it's been there for a while, you got a whole different set of priorities and problems that you're dealing with.
Right. That's more in the utilization category. So how can I make use of all this wood waste? Can we make, furniture? Can we make cribbage boards? Things like that. It's ways to keep it out of the wood waste stream as tipping fees can be really expensive in the metro for getting rid of tree waste. If you're out on the fringes where you're not yet being impacted by EAB, planning. If you're in a community, having an inventory in your town or on your own property. If you're a private woodland owner, reaching out to your area DNR forester that can help you out. If you're looking for management options and maybe some silvicultural guidelines and things like that, those are all good steps to take to prepare for the inevitability of emerald ash borer reaching you at some point.
Yeah, the inventory really is the key to what starts it all. You have to know how much ash you're going to be dealing with and where they're located.
Right.
So, Yep, it starts it all.
It's hard to manage if you don't know what you have.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's hard to come up with a final number for the community to know, like, this is how many we're going to have to manage, and this is how much it's going to cost. So, all right. Do either of you have any final thoughts about EAB and its future in Minnesota?
I mean, we kind of cover it. It's going to eventually reach everybody. It's going to continue to spread, hopefully at slower rates in the more northern parts of the state, especially in areas where we have really large black ash resource. But like I said, planning for its arrival is really key. So don't be caught off guard.
Yeah, what are we at? At 60 about counties out of 87. So we're approaching, not too many years in the future where it will be found in every county. But just having it present in a county doesn't necessarily mean big impacts. So there are, there's that opportunity, even after it shows up in a county, to still take some action. Use all those tools we talked about, insecticides, removals, et cetera, to try and preserve trees. Even if it's just for the time being. So I think, it's hard because this has been such a long-term thing. It's hard to keep it in the forefront of your mind because there's a lot of things to worry about in life, right? And this is something that's played out over years and years and will continue to play out over years. But it will continue to be a thing, for many years to come. So.
Perfect. And then as people are out in their community, and especially in those new areas that haven't detected EAB yet, if they do happen to see the signs that John was talking about, like the woodpecker damage, the thinning canopy, you can always contact the MDA's Report a Pest line. And if you have pictures to send in of the ash trees that you're worried about, John can take a look at those. All of the EAB reports get directed to him, and you can find the information for our report, how to report into us, by phone, email, or our online form online at www.mda.state.mn.us/reportapest. It's all one word. Well, thank you so much to both of you. It's truly been a joy talking to you both. I certainly learned a lot, and I'm sure our listeners did too.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
This has been Smarty Plants, a podcast from the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. Our producers are Brittany Ravel and Sadie Anderson. Our editor is Larry Schumacher, and I have been your host. You can learn more about pests and other invasive species that affect our environment at www.mda.state.mn.us/plants-insects. And while you head to our website, we'll be working on the next episode of Smarty Plants. See you there.